It was late autumn, and a biting wind had begun to whip through the Cotswolds countryside when I took the job as night watchman at Blackwood Academy. Blackwood was no ordinary school. Nestled deep within rolling hills and dense woods, this Gothic boarding school was renowned for its long history and whispered legends. They said it dated back to the Tudor era, and as I walked its dark stone hallways at night, I found it easy to believe. My shift began as dusk settled, staining the tall, arched-leaded windows of the great hall with a fading, deep violet light. As darkness enveloped the school grounds, a heavy silence began to spread. By day, Blackwood buzzed with the laughter and footsteps of students, but as night fell, it was utterly consumed by quiet, broken only by the wind whistling through the stone chimneys and the echo of my own footsteps on the flagstone floors. Usually my nights were peaceful enough. I'd patrol the buildings, ensuring all windows and doors were bolted shut, check the clanking ancient coal heating system in the damp basement, and sometimes sit in the small security office, sipping hot tea and reading under the dim, green-shaded desk lamp. But lately something felt different. Starting a few nights prior, I began hearing strange sounds at the tail end of my shift. At first, I dismissed them as drafts, but they grew more distinct, soft shuffling footsteps along the stone corridors, the creak of heavy oak doors seemingly opening and closing on their own, and occasionally, a whispered lullaby drifting from the deep shadows. The day staff, when I mentioned the sounds, just laughed it off. "Must be the wind howling down the chimneys," they'd say, or "This place has been haunted for ages, bound to hear odd noises." But I knew better. These sounds weren't random. They felt intentional, as if someone or something was trying to get my attention. Tonight was no different. As the grandfather clock in the great hall chimed 11, I began my final patrol. A weak moonlight filtered through thick clouds, casting pale silver streaks across the moss-covered stone walls. The silence was suffocating, broken only by the frantic thump of my own heart in my chest. The musty scent of cold stone and dust in the library seemed thicker than usual, mingling with a cloying heavy sweetness of lavender, almost sickeningly so. I walked down the north corridor, where tapestries embroidered with the family crest of the school's founders hung, the stone lions on the crest seeming to watch my every step. As I neared the spiral staircase leading to the old library, I froze. From above, where it should have been pitch black, a faint yellow light flickered down. My heart lurched. No one was permitted in the old library after curfew. It had been closed off for years, after a mysterious fire people whispered was connected to a cursed ancient book. Clutching my flashlight tightly, I cautiously ascended the stairs. The higher I climbed, the clearer I heard another sound beyond my own footsteps. It was a low, melodic hum, steady and even, almost like a hymn, yet tinged with a mournful, plaintive quality. When I reached the top landing, I stopped dead. The carved oak door to the old library stood ajar, and from within a wan yellow light spilled out, along with the eerie humming. The cloying lavender scent from before was now intensely strong, making me feel slightly lightheaded. I gently pushed the door wider. The old library stretched before me, bathed in a sickly yellow glow, emanating from half-burnt candles perched precariously on towering bookshelves. Ancient, dust-laden books stood silent sentinels on the shelves, yellowed pages emitting a scent both musty and sickly sweet. But what truly caught my eye was a small figure standing in the center of the room, by a mahogany reading desk. It was a boy, clad in the gray uniform of Blackwood Academy, his blonde hair falling forward to obscure his face. He stood with his head bowed, his small hands moving lightly over the pages of a book, creating the low, melodic humming I'd heard. My voice trembled as I called out, strained with fear, "Hey, kid, who are you? What are you doing here at this hour?" The boy slowly raised his head. As his face emerged from the shadows into the candlelight, I nearly dropped my flashlight. His eyes were empty, pearlescent white like polished stones, and across his pale face, a grotesque smile stretched, revealing rows of unervingly sharp teeth. Before I could recoil, the boy stepped down from behind the reading desk. His small hands remained on the book, but now, those fingers began to turn the pages faster, more violently, creating a dry, rustling, terrifying sound, like wind tearing through rotten parchment. The lavender scent intensified, becoming suffocatingly thick. The air around me seemed to solidify, pressing against my chest, making it hard to breathe. A bone-deep chill ran down my spine, an overwhelming sense of dread seizing my mind. The boy began to walk toward me, that unnatural smile still plastered across his face. The rustling of the book pages shredded the silence, mingling with the soft, yet chillingly unsettling sound of his bare feet on the wooden floor. I backed away towards the door, trying to keep distance from the grotesque figure advancing. As he drew closer, I saw him more clearly. The gray uniform of Blackwood was no longer pristine. It was tattered and torn in places, stained with dark, tarry marks, and a foul, putrid odor wafted from it. Thought abandoned me. Only raw instinct remained, screaming at me to escape. I spun and fled, bursting from the old library, sprinting back down the spiral staircase, the rustling of the unholy book pages chasing after me, tearing, shrieking, until I tripped on the landing and cold darkness swallowed my consciousness. The next morning, when I awoke in the school's infirmary, it all seemed like a horrifying nightmare. But when I looked down at my wrist, I still saw the livid purple bruises, and in my head, the rustling of that spectral book still echoed, haunting, reminding me that what I had experienced last night was no dream at all, and perhaps tonight it would return. I was a night shift security guard, newly assigned to work at Eldoria Academy. Tonight, my first shift was about to begin. Outside, the winter night had fully descended, and biting winds lashed against the grim gray stone walls, carrying with them the whisper of rustling leaves and the eerie crackle of breaking branches. My footsteps echoed lonely in the seemingly endless hallway. Pale yellow lamplight cast long, distorted shadows of myself onto the cold stone floor. The pungent aroma of rotting wood and damp mildew assaulted my nostrils, mingling with the subtle, sweet scent of burning wax from an antique lantern at the corridor's end. An unnerving silence reigned, broken only by the sound of my own measured breaths and the slow, deliberate tick-tock of an ancient pendulum clock resonating from the headmaster's office. I took a long pull of scalding hot coffee, attempting to banish the encroaching drowsiness and monotony. The security monitor in front of me remained static, displaying only empty corridors and classrooms as black as pitch. I glanced at my watch, nearly 1 in the morning. Aside from the howling wind outside, there wasn't another sound. Suddenly, a subtle noise drifted from the corridor's end. It was akin to the sound of wood scraping against the stone floor. My heart skipped a beat. Probably just the wind whistling through a crack in the door, I reassured myself. But the sound returned, clearer now and closer. Like someone was walking slowly, dragging something heavy across the floor. A chill ran down my spine. I froze, holding my breath to listen. The scraping continued, steady and slow, growing nearer. Mustering my courage, I moved quietly towards the sound at the hallway's end. The flickering lamplight cast dancing, elongated shadows that twisted grotesquely on the walls, making everything seem more bizarre and frightening. Reaching the hallway's curve, I paused. Before me lay another corridor, darker and longer, leading towards the abandoned classroom block. And the sound persisted, unmistakable now. It seemed to emanate directly from that deserted classroom area. Cold sweat prickled my forehead. I swallowed hard, my throat suddenly tight and dry. Impossible, no one should be in the school at this hour. It must be the wind or just my imagination running wild. Yet, my feet disobeyed logic, stepping slowly forward, drawn towards the mysterious, abandoned classrooms. With each step, the scraping grew louder, as if beckoning me deeper into the darkness. I flicked on my flashlight, its stark white beam slicing through the gloom, revealing only rows of dust-laden desks, blank blackboards, and walls peeling with age and moss. The heavy, musty odor intensified, filling my nostrils and giving me the unsettling sensation of being lost within an ancient tomb. Abruptly, my flashlight beam locked onto something at the corridor's end. In a shadowed recess behind a stone pillar, I glimpsed a fleeting dark shape. My heart seemed to stop cold. I stood motionless, holding my breath and observing. The dark shape remained still, as inert as a statue. Probably just an old coat hanging on a hook, I told myself. But as I edged closer, the dark shape twitched subtly. The sound arose again, originating from the dark form itself. This time I recognized it more clearly. It wasn't wood being dragged. It was the sound of brittle bones grinding against each other. Goosebumps erupted all over my skin. Trembling, I raised my flashlight, directing its full beam onto the dark shape. And then I saw. It was a human form, tall and gaunt, standing rigidly at the corridor's end. Its body was shrouded in shadow, with only faint streaks of light catching its face, enough for me to discern it was not a normal human face. Its skin was pallid, deathly pale, and its eye sockets were deep and black, devoid of whites, pupils, just two bottomless, soul-consuming voids. It slowly raised its head, turning its face towards me. And then a voice rasped, like gravel grinding on stone, echoing from nowhere, shattering the stillness of the night. I was completely paralyzed. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't even scream. I could only stand rooted to the spot, staring at that grotesque figure, watching as it slowly stepped out of the shadows, step by step, advancing towards me. I don't remember how I ran. I only know I bolted from the abandoned classroom block, sprinting desperately back towards the security office, leaving behind that terrifying figure and the chilling rasping sound that still echoed in my ears. I collapsed, gasping for breath, in the security office, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. The camera monitors remained static, showing no sign of anyone in the abandoned classroom area. Trembling, I dialed the police, my voice stammering as I recounted what I had just witnessed. The police arrived quickly. They searched the entire school, thoroughly checked the abandoned classroom block, but found nothing, no one, no trace of anything. They only discovered some strange footprints in the old corridor, but those footprints vanished inexplicably right before the doorway of the abandoned classrooms. They regarded me with skeptical glances, likely thinking I was overwrought and had imagined everything. But I knew what I had seen, what I had heard. And the bone-chilling coldness I felt when that figure drew near, that I will never forget. I continued working at the academy, but I never again dared to patrol the abandoned classroom block alone at night. In the nights that followed, the school remained quiet, but sometimes I would hear it again, faintly, somewhere in the distance, that haunting, rasping cry. We were known as the Problem Kids, notorious for our reckless pranks. This ancient boarding school, with its endless hallways and dust-filled classrooms, had witnessed more than its fair share of our laughable yet cringeworthy escapades. But that particular night, things went far beyond the usual spectrum of laughable yet cringeworthy. It was a bitterly cold winter night. The wind howled through the aged window panes, bringing with it a damp chill and the scent of melting snow. Inside the cozy warmth of our dorm room, Liam, with mischief twinkling in his eyes, shattered the evening quiet. "Hey Alex, have you heard about the old clock tower in the courtyard?" I raised an eyebrow, glancing up. "The clock tower? Isn't it just some old tower?" Liam chuckled mysteriously, lowering his voice to a whisper. "It's not that simple. They say it's haunted." I scoffed, waving my hand dismissively. "Nonsense. You still believe in ghost stories." But even as I said it, an undeniable sense of curiosity began to stir within me. "Believe what you want," Liam shrugged, but his eyes still held a challenging glint. "But are you game to explore it tonight with me? See if there really are any ghosts?" Liam's proposal, absurd as it sounded, ignited my own adventurous spirit. Dorm nights were often long and mind-numbingly boring, and the idea of exploring a haunted place was definitely more appealing than hunching over textbooks memorizing dry math formulas. "All right," I nodded in agreement. "But if nothing happens, you're buying me breakfast tomorrow." And so, as the clock struck midnight, we too sneaked out of our dorm room. The corridor outside the classrooms was steeped in silent darkness, illuminated only by the faint, ghostly light emanating from the wall-mounted night lights. Our footsteps echoed on the aged wooden floor, the sound resonating in the stillness, creating eerie creaking sounds. We crept along the hallway, hearts pounding in our chests. The darkness felt thick and heavy, swallowing everything around us. The shadows cast by the night light stretched into bizarre shapes on the walls. Finally, we reached the door leading to the inner courtyard. The winter night had draped the school in a jet-black velvet curtain. A weak crescent moon cast pale streaks of light across the snow-covered ground. The clock tower loomed before us, rising into the night sky like a skeletal finger. Approaching the clock tower, the atmosphere grew colder and more somber. The tower's massive oak door was firmly shut, but when Liam gave it a gentle push, it creaked open easily with a spine-chilling groan. Inside the tower, darkness reigned completely, with only a sliver of light filtering through a crack in the door, just enough for us to make out the spiral staircase leading upwards. The smells of dust, mildew, and something indescribably metallic and fishy assaulted my nostrils, causing me to wrinkle my nose in disgust. The space inside the tower was eerily silent, absorbing all sound. Only the soft echoes of our own footsteps reverberated in the darkness, amplifying the unsettling feeling. We began to climb the cold stone steps. The higher we ascended, the thinner and colder the air became. The wind whistling outside the tower's small windows sounded like someone moaning in pain. My heart raced, cold sweat beading on my forehead despite the freezing temperature. I was starting to regret agreeing to this foolish idea. Finally, we reached the top of the tower where the colossal clock mechanism was housed. In the dim moonlight filtering through the windows, the massive metal gears appeared like grotesque mechanical monsters. Shadows danced within the room, casting bizarre shapes on the walls. Suddenly, a strange sound echoed. It wasn't the familiar tick-tock of a clock, but a soft, scuffing, thumping sound, like someone dragging something heavy across the floor. The sound came from somewhere below us in the deep darkness of the room. A gust of icy wind swept through, making the hair on the back of my neck stand on end. The temperature in the room seemed to plummet abruptly. Liam, usually so boisterous and brave, also shivered slightly. Then we heard a whisper, very faint, very indistinct, but enough to make the blood in our veins run cold. The whisper seemed to emanate from nowhere, unclear who it belonged to or what it was saying. But in the terrifying silence of the clock tower, it carried an indescribable chill and unease. In that instant, both Liam and I sensed something was wrong. This wasn't just an old clock tower. This wasn't just a silly prank. There was something else, something terrifying, present with us in this room. Without a word to each other, we turned and fled. Our footsteps were frantic, almost tripping down the stairs. In the darkness, we stumbled, nearly lost our footing, but neither of us dared to stop. Our panting breaths and pounding hearts mingled with the echoing footsteps in the tower, creating a chaotic symphony of fear. Bursting out of the clock tower, we sprinted across the snow-covered courtyard, not daring to look back until we reached our dorm room, slamming the door shut and collapsing breathless. Inside the room, the soft yellow lamplight didn't seem to quite dispel the cold and haunting feeling we had just experienced. That night, neither of us could sleep. The image of the clock tower looming in the darkness, the chilling whisper, and the feeling of unease still haunted our minds. We never told anyone about it, afraid of being ridiculed, afraid of being punished. But in our hearts, we both understood that there are some places best left unexplored. And the school's clock tower from that night onwards remained forever a forbidden place in our minds.